Hello again, Fish-A-Lots. In this episode, I'm super excited to share with you a very underrated, very little talked about loop knot that can be used for rigs, lures, freshwater fishing, saltwater fishing, and it's super tough. And of course, I'm talking about the figure of 8 loop knot. So let's get into it. I'll show it to you right now. So first, you're just gonna fold your line over just like that, and you're gonna make your first loop, which is right here. Then you're gonna take your line, you're gonna make a second loop, just like that. So that's your first loop, that's your second loop. You're gonna twist your second loop to kind of make a figure of 8, like you see there, and you're just gonna take your first loop and pass it through, just like this. Now, if you do this right, you will have what looks like an 8 right there. And that is awesome. It's like a good knot indicator, because if it looks like this, you just tighten it down and you have your loop knot right there. So that's your figure of 8 loop knot. It's super straight, it's super strong, and you know what I typically do is I will use this knot to top off my rigs, right? So I'll have like a high-low rig, I'll have hooks on the bottom, I'll have a weight on a surgeon's loop knot, and this will be the top of my rig with my swivel, because if I get hung up in the wreck or hung up on the bottom, this knot is so strong, I could usually break off one of the dropper loop knots or a surgeon's loop knot and still keep the rest of my rig. So I really recommend trying this knot out if you haven't tried it out yet. Now, let's move on to lures. So this knot is absolutely fantastic for a loop knot on something like your jig heads here to get the most action out of your lures and your soft plastics that you could possibly get. So let me show you that right now. So now with your jig, you're gonna tie the exact same knot. The only difference is you're gonna tie it with the jig attached to the line. So first you pass your line through the jig head right here, and now you're gonna form your loop, just like we did before. Again, the only difference is now you have a jig head attached to it. So there's your first loop. You're gonna make a second loop, just like that. You're gonna fold this loop, just like I showed you before. And now you're just gonna pass this lure through this loop right here. So it's just that easy. Now again, I have that figure of 8 that I showed you before, which means that I did it perfectly right, and this is ready to be cinched down. However, a little trick here is I want to get this loop next to this lure right here, next to this jig head, about the size of my pinky nail right there. So what I like to do is I like to grab the loop here, the bottom end of the loop, and pinch it up against the jig head with my finger, okay, just like that. And now I'll tighten down this loop knot so that I have the smallest loop possible on the jig head. And there you go. That is actually perfect for this knot right here. You see that? So now I have all the advantages of the loop knot on my jig head, all the freedom that it offers my lure for the most natural presentation possible, and I have all the added strength of having the figure of 8 loop knot, which is just immensely more strong than something like a non-slip loop knot, and it's just a great, great alternative for the non-slip loop knot. Now, in my opinion, if you know how to tie this just like this, you never have to tie the non-slip loop knot ever again. So if you're interested to see a comparison between this and that non-slip loop knot, I actually do a line breaking test right here in this video. So go ahead and check that out and just see how much more powerful this knot is than some of the most favorite loop knots out there. So all right, Fish-A-Lots, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you out there on the water.